I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I told you I wanted to. I guess I gave a list of some things I'd like to talk about, and I wanted to start off with tariffs. It's creating a lot of confusion, probably misinformation, and just a lot of tension and craziness out there. What's it really doing for us?
Well, the first quick news item is that the stock market's up like 1,200 points right now, as 50 to, as it's reported in some places, 70 countries are flocking to make deals with the United States. Listen, I come from the Austrian economics wing of things. I mean, Mises, von Hayek, and Friedman are my friends. Yeah. And all of them are generally against tariffs. And I've always had this argument in that, you know, there's a lot you could talk about with tariffs, but I've always had this argument with people in the libertarian wing of economic theory that you cannot have anything but reciprocal trade. I've been saying for years we need bilateral agreements with countries. We need to get out of these big internationalist organizations like the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and others, because that is not how you do trade. And I also say this, that we've been in a situation where we do not have a free trade environment. Other countries have free trade with us. We don't have free trade with them. So I endorse the effort that Trump is undertaking, and I think it's beginning to bear some fruit. And if he is successful at it, like I don't want to build a trade regime with the rates that he threw out this week. I think that would be destructive. But to throw them out in most cases, we're going to do it.
Yeah. In most cases, that was either matching or upping on those that are doing us. It's not saying, well, you give us free trade, but I'm going to charge you, which is what they've been doing to us.
That's exactly right. And this is where the whole kind of libertarian wing of it, and everyone that's screaming and yelling on the conservative economic side of things right now, is not giving enough credence to. Although I'll give Stephen Moore credit, because he is economist Stephen Moore. But this is what we've needed to do since World War II. I've been telling people a lot lately. We had a trade regime after World War II where we were not nearly as harmed as other countries. We just spent a lot of money on the war, but many other countries were devastated by the destruction of it.
Right.
So we opened up our very strong markets to them so that they could help rebuild. And, you know, you can argue one way or the other whether that was a good policy, but the reality is we don't live in that world anymore, and this needed to change dramatically. And then one other item, we gave most favored nation status to a communist country, China, back in the late 90s. The founder of my organization, Howard Phillips, at the time, was arguing against it. I know I was, because of the stupid argument that if we just allow our markets to be opened up to China, they're going to cozy up to us and then have a free democratic society. And it just never happened, and we've got proof of it right now.
Well, no, they steal patents and copyrights and abuse us, you know. Absolutely, they do. Yeah. So you think the tariffs, and you're hesitant to say they're definitely going to work, but you believe that they're in the right direction, the things we should have been doing all along.
This is a risky gambit on Donald Trump's part.
Okay.
Because what he is doing is requiring negotiations to take place. And keep in mind, I mean, the harm, like all these countries have these high tariff regimes, and they don't have these internal debates about tariffs, and we don't condemn them for it. Yes. And in fact, we condemn Donald Trump for trying to change it.
That seems to be the point, and that nobody gets. And I think Trump did a great thing to put that chart out that showed the, you know, I guess that was an average tariff, because not all tariffs are straight line. I mean, sometimes they'll focus on dairy or something, you know, and spike that because they want to protect their dairy business like Canada. But
and look at that chart. So it's just so funny. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, you just put a 56% tariff on Vietnam. And they're saying that right as they are ignoring the left-hand column, which shows a 90% tariff.
On us, yeah. Nowhere on that chart did he outdo their tariff.
Right, he didn't.
In fact, it was a smaller fraction of it, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, it was just an initial shot across the bow. And I can guarantee you that in his mind, that if people aren't coming to negotiate, that he will go all the way on one-for-one with them. And I believe in reciprocal tariffs. Every conservative, libertarian-minded, Austrian economics-minded economist should support the idea of reciprocal tariffs. Because if you get into these trade regimes where you give special benefits to certain people and you don't just have one rate that everyone's got to, then you have a total lobbying problem. You have a corruption problem. That's another thing that's really bad about a lot of these trade agreements.
Now we've had like I've heard of the same as you, is up to 70 countries now. You know, Japan like first in line along with Israel, but there's also some that have shown that they are going to create a war. Canada wants to create a tariff war. China, same way. You know, defiant. Mexico to a certain degree, although there's some cooperation in Mexico. I think they're going to be left out in the cold when they see that all the other countries are sitting down to negotiate some reasonable solutions.
Well, and in the case of Canada, they're just under this crazy leftist Labor Party regime up there. That this guy's even worse than Trudeau, it seems. Yeah. And he's arrogant. Listen, Canada. It really, and there have been a lot of people like Doug Ford, the guy who's been the premier of Ontario, who's been really critical of Trump. But even he admits that we have by far the larger economy than they do. They can't ignore us economically. They can politically, because they're going into elections, try to say, hey, we're really tough against the United States. And I'm not against Canadians wanting to have a sense of national pride and purpose. Fine, I have no problem with that. But the rational argument here is to get all this straightened up. They will never be harmed by having a reciprocal agreement to us. And in fact, if we want open markets like we were told NAFTA was going to do for us, then have 0% tariffs on both sides instead of a big regime that monitors whether everyone's trading fairly. Because that's what even USMCA has that sort of regime to it. And these internationalist bodies are no help to anyone. Just trade fairly one with another, even if it's a low tariff going each way. Just make it the same thing for everybody, and everybody wins at the end. Because, by the way, another one of the arguments on the libertarian side of this is, how can you do this? Because you take away the efficiencies of what if it can be manufactured more efficiently and less expensively somewhere else? Why wouldn't we allow that? Well, okay, I don't necessarily disagree with that. My question is, why do we do it unfairly right now?
Right.
And this is why, as a philosophical and economic argument, I think Donald Trump is right to try to reset this broken regime of trade that we have around the country that benefits certain groups over others and allows countries to play games with the industries of other countries. That's just all got to change.
Yeah, I think it's hit that way. I was glad to see the stock market doing some differences. In fact, it's up like, well, I'm just looking at 1,400 right now, the Dow.
Yeah, just a few minutes ago before I came on, it was 1,200. And
it seems to be a rally, and a lot of this is just emotion. I can't believe the people that the same people that fall for it every time this happens. You know, like the world is ending, and it's all emotion at this point because none of the fundamentals have changed.
Not in the least. Yeah. And the principles of economics never change. Of course, that's always the argument that's used to oppose tariffs, but their economic arguments are wrong too. Yeah. The reality is this: if you can do something efficiently and better at a lower cost, people are going to buy that product, and then other companies that would like to sell the same things are going to have to meet the same criteria to get there. And one other argument, and this is kind of an ethical, moral, even Christian biblical argument, is just kind of the golden rule. The way that business works, if you just are the greediest jerk who wanted to become a billionaire, you still have to follow the golden rule to become a billionaire, because you have to produce products that people want. You have to take care of your employees so they can deliver and manufacture or produce those products in some fashion that people want. And then you have to keep cycling this process over and over again so that you can keep growing and building from there. And even greedy jerks can become billionaires by following God's law.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing when it comes to international, too. You know, treat the golden rule, treat everyone fairly and in the right way. And that's the regime that we're looking for, certainly the regime that Donald Trump is trying to find.
Something Trump was looking for in these tariffs is to have a flood of businesses returning to America, returning manufacturing. And it looks like a lot of promises have already been made to do that. Now, time will tell to get those shovels in the dirt, but it looks like that's already made an impact.
It has. Now, this is an area where I might have a very slight disagreement with Donald Trump, not in terms of what he's trying to do, but in terms of what I think he thinks the effect will be. I do grant there are a lot of industries that have manufacturing that has truly been stolen by the United States, because I think Ross Perot was always right about the giant sucking sound, he said, would happen to manufacturing under NAFTA. And it's I don't believe in protectionism, but I do believe that we need to protect our interests with these sort of trade regimes. But the result is going to be that we will get some manufacturing back here. Like when Taiwan Semiconductor, the largest TSMI, the largest manufacturer of chips in the world, when they want to build a plant in the United States, that's a rational decision, because the technical skill it takes to do that kind of manufacturing is truly better found in first world than third world countries or second world countries. And so that's a rational decision. But if you're talking about the manufacture of plastic toys that can be sold, that may or may not work so well in the United States. I mean, it might. I think, by the way, you know, another thing we could do to get our manufacturing back here is to get rid of the minimum wage. Yeah. The minimum wage is one of the most farcical economic concepts that there ever was. It creates inefficiencies in the markets, and it doesn't allow young people to learn a skill. Like a young teenager has about as much skill as some person in some third world country has, who doesn't have access to the kind of education and training that we have in this country.
True.
You know, you have people of older ages in third world countries that are being beat down by their own countries because their economic structure that the government runs is so horrible that they can't gain the kind of skills. So they're kind of consigned to that sort of, for example, manufacturing or other low-skill things that there are. But a teenager in this country is also has none of those skills and could really make a living and learn a trade if we could bring that kind of manufacturing back. That would do just as big a job of bringing manufacturing to this country as anything else.
Yeah, chances of that are slim. With the left, that's one of the few things that they just beat the drum on: abortion and fair wage, which they call fair wage. Like it's somebody raising a family of four or something.
Right.
It needs to be the minimum. Although the federal minimum is, what, 7.25? The minimum in Arizona is like 15. You know, we had a referendum pass, which we're a referendum state, which is ridiculous. But you know, a lot of money will change the Constitution in Arizona, and that's what happened.
Now, the positive benefit of that is the very first attempts at having people be able to contribute money so kids could get out of public school to private school came from referendums there back in the day when I used to live in Arizona.
Oh.
But, you know, this is, you're right, it's a challenge. I lived in Colorado for a long time, same thing. But, you know, this minimum wage thing is economically wrong. I know you didn't have me call to talk about that, but the minimum wage thing is just economically invalid because you can't pay people the wage that is commensurate with the skill that they have. And that harms young people from being able to learn a trade, learn a skill, learn how to work, just basically how to work.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that. How many young kids? I mean, I was born in the 60s, late 60s. How many kids are working and doing things like kids in my generation, in the Gen Z generation did? Gen X, excuse me, not very many.
No.
It's not the same.
No.
They're sitting on their telephones. that their parents bought them and playing games, video games during the summer.
I grew up with,
but we had to work.
Yeah, minimum wage was $1.25 when I was old enough to work. So, yeah, it was a lot different, but people were willing to hire you. They could do that. Federal grants. I was reading on today's local paper here in Yuma, a little bit of whining about the federal grants being eliminated and the harm it's going to do to our public health. And getting into the story, it was federal grants that were set up and put out there for COVID, which is not an epidemic anymore. I mean, and yet we're working off of 4 or 5 grants from the federal government in order to hire workers to work all over in our rural areas and do a lot of stuff. And they don't want to give it up. It's kind of like you start a program, we can never end it. But these federal grants that are out there, I guess they're given a look over, but it's being demonized. It's front page of the paper this morning on the federal grants are going to harm us. How are we heading in the right direction of federal grants? I guess we're seeing a lot of protests, a lot of people picking up Doge is the worst guy in the country and all that stuff.
Well, the only thing that they're protesting for is bureaucrats.
Yeah,
and these bureaucratic nightmares like USAID that are thankfully getting shut down. But these grants really bring to light the statement that Ronald Reagan made many years ago that in this world nothing approximates eternal life any closer than a government program, because we added. Remember that the CARES Act in this time of year in 2020 was passed, and they were going to voice vote a $2.5 trillion COVID relief bill, so-called relief bill. It's crazy. All of that spending, this grant situation exposes, has remained all this time.
Right.
The federal budget, the total federal spend in 2019 before COVID was about $4.5 trillion. That's all money spent out of the federal government, discretionary and non-discretionary spending. And this fiscal year, it'll be $7 trillion.
Yeah.
So what we find out, even if we adjust for inflation and keep the 2019 spending, the spending this year would have been roughly around $5.35 trillion, right around there, if you adjust for inflation. So every bit of that COVID spending has remained, and there's no reason for it to have remained. It should have been pulled back immediately. If we just pulled back every specific spending program that was created in the CARES Act and rescinded it today, which we should be able to do, then we would have a balanced budget right now in terms of our annual deficits, roughly, because some non-discretionary spending increases. You got the baby boomers, and the Gen Xers starting to come into retirement program or getting close to that. But nonetheless, we would still be able to not have this $2 trillion of waste if we just got rid of everything that was authorized by the CARES Act.
But you got
and we should.
You got leftists right now screaming and yelling in the streets, but they're destroying jobs. They're taking away jobs. I mean, yeah, these are jobs where people don't go into work, jobs where the buildings are empty and we're paying them to stay home, jobs that were necessary because of a pandemic that has since lapsed. But I guess the message isn't out there that it's wasteful. And we're not getting mainstream media on board. We're not getting anybody on board talking about the entire picture.
No, we're not. And this is day 78 of Democrats for the bureaucrats. That's literally what these people are in the streets arguing for. We save the federal employees, and everyone else in the country is sitting back saying, well, no, I kind of really rather have my job saved. And they really get upset if you tell them two interesting statistics that most people don't think about. The first one is that 6 of the 10 wealthiest counties in this country are in the Washington, D.C. area. And that ain't because of free market economics. Okay, that's only because of the federal government. The second one being that the median the median individual income of non-government employees is somewhere in the $50,000 to $55,000 a year range, whereas for federal employees, it's in the $80,000 a year range. And this is a major factor of angst And some people don't know these statistics to think about it directly, but indirectly, they know that government employees do far better than they do. Their jobs are more secure. They never go away. They get far better benefits. I mean, even state and local employees who probably make something closer on a median range than your average American, they still get wildly wonderful benefits in health care and retirement and pension plans that average Americans don't get. And Democrats stand for that. That's what they stand for. They stand for major corporations and for government employees. They do not in the least in any of their policies stand for average people. When Bernie Sanders is out there talking about how walking wages aren't available to people, none of his policies would do anything for that. He just makes that a talking point so he can advance his otherwise curious political agenda that allows him to have 3 very expensive homes.
I'm running low on time, but deportations I want to discuss. The left also stands for no deportations. They want a federal judge to look at every single person. It would not be possible. We could never right the problems of the past 4 years if everybody had to go to a federal judge. It looks like the Supreme Court's starting to get engaged and probably going to help out with that matter.
They did. There were a couple arguments that came out. They seemed fallacious to me to say that there are some rights of illegal aliens. The Alien Enemies Act does allow Trinidad Aragua to be thrown out of the country, criminals to be thrown out of the country. But I would also argue that federal law, as it exists today, and by the way, has existed since the 1986 Immigration Reform Act that Ronald Reagan so auspiciously signed, it gives the administration a high degree of levity to get rid of people out of this country who have come here illegally. There can be potentially a judicial process for some of these people and by law, but the reality is this: if you come here illegally, you should not be able to stay here. You should be asked to go away. But the real brilliance of the approach that the Trump administration is taking is we don't know yet. I haven't seen numbers of self-deportations.
No.
I guarantee you there is a decent amount of self-deportation taking place. We have history with this because in Eisenhower's administration and in FDR's administration, we had massive self-deportation take place on the tunes of millions even then because immigration law was being enforced. So when you enforce immigration law, you send a message to others who are here illegally that they might be sought after as well. And a lot of them will not want to suffer the pain of deportation and just figure out ways to go back to their countries. But and I know we're short on time here, but I just want to say this whole immigration thing, let's keep in mind, people are coming to this country. Many of them, and I believe most of them, in their motive, even though they were illegally allowed to do so, wanted to come here to get a better life because where they were living is so bad.
Agreed.
But we never talk about what those countries are doing to cause the problems that they want to run away from. No one talks about that. And it figures into a lot of what we're discussing, even about tariffs right now. There are so many countries who have poor government and economic situations that harm their people, and it is right for us to act in a way that can allow us to assert the moral authority to say, get your own act straight.
Sure.
We're not going to pay for everything, and we don't need to, and we don't have to. But we can have a process of allowing people to get here in a legal manner, and that does exist. And it's beneficial to people as well too. And we could reform some of it, but certainly not amnesty. We have a good immigration system on the books if we would only have it administrated by Republican and Democrat presidents that get elected, and we have not had that for a long time.
Looks like we're trying to write it. Jim, I appreciate it. Give out your website again so listeners can stay in touch with you.
Sure. They should go to theconservativecaucus.org. That's THE, conservativecaucus.org.
All right, man. I appreciate the call. Thank you for what you do, man. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Russ.
All right. Bye-bye.